Her little voice tore through the quiet night like lightning through glass. "Please help my mommy! They're hurting her!" Everyone on the street froze. A tiny girl in a wrinkled blue dress came running barefoot across the parking lot, her face streaked with tears and fear. She was only 5, too small, too fragile, but her scream carried more power than any siren. The riders parked across the street turned, confusion turning into concern. Their engines hummed under the fading sunset, leather jackets glinting under streetlights. The biggest of them, a man with a heavy frame and tattoos across his arms, slowly removed his helmet, his expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. Before those engines roared to life, before that rescue ever began, that day had started just like any other for Sarah Thompson. Sarah was 45, a hard-working Latina custodian in one of the city's tallest glass high-rises, Hale Tower. To outsiders, it looked like a palace of success, marble floors, silver chandeliers, rich people walking like they owned the sun. But for Sarah, it was just another battlefield. Her hands were cracked from bleach, her back ached from years of scrubbing other people's messes. Yet she showed up every single day with her hair tied neatly and her uniform spotless, not because she loved her job, but because she loved her daughter. Emily, that same little girl, was the reason Sarah kept going. That evening, Emily sat on the floor of the janitor's room coloring with half-broken crayons. "Mama, look," she said proudly, "I drew a big building like this one." Sarah smiled through her exhaustion. "It's beautiful, baby. Maybe one day you'll live in one." Emily giggled. "And you too, Mama. We'll have a big office, and nobody will yell at you." That line hit Sarah like a knife, but she smiled anyway. "One day, sweetheart, one day." Just then, her phone buzzed, and her smile disappeared. The caller ID made her stomach twist. Richard Hale, the billionaire owner of the tower. "Sarah," his cold voice snapped through the phone, "I want this entire building spotless before midnight. I've got investors coming. Every room, every floor. No excuses." Sarah swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, I don't care what's done. Make it perfect." Click. The line went dead. She looked at her little girl. Emily's big brown eyes were watching, full of worry. "Mama, can we go home early today?" Sarah forced a smile. "I'll try, baby. Just a few more hours." She went back to work. Room after room, floor after floor. The smell of chemicals clung to her clothes. Her hands burned. But she kept pushing through for Emily. By 9 p.m., she was still cleaning, long after everyone had left. Emily tried to help, dragging a small rag bigger than her hand. "Mama, I can wipe this one too," she said proudly. Sarah chuckled softly. "You're my little helper." Outside, headlights cut through the night. Expensive cars rolled into the parking lot, one of them black and sleek like power on wheels. Richard Hale had arrived. He stepped out in his $1,000 suit, his gold watch catching the light. His guests followed, men with whiskey glasses and laughter that reeked of arrogance. The moment Richard saw Sarah still working, his smile vanished. "What is this?" he barked. "You had all day." I was just finishing, sir," she stammered, wiping her forehead. "I've been here since morning." "Don't give me excuses," he shouted, snatching the mop from her hand and throwing it across the floor. The sound echoed like thunder. His guests went quiet. One of them chuckled awkwardly, another looked away. Emily, frightened, ran to her mother's side. "Please don't yell at my mama," she cried. Richard glared at her. "Get that brat out of here." Sarah stepped protectively in front of her daughter. "Sir, please, she's just a child. I couldn't leave her alone." Richard's voice rose. "You brought a kid into my building? Do you even understand who you work for?" Sarah's voice broke. "Please, I needed the money. Before she could finish, he shoved her, hard. Sarah stumbled, hitting the counter. Pain shot through her arm. Emily screamed, "Stop hurting her!" But Richard didn't stop. His pride had already crossed the line. He grabbed Sarah's wrist and yanked her again. She cried out in pain. That was the moment Emily ran. She bolted through the open doors, barefoot and terrified. Her little feet slapped the marble. Her sobs echoed into the night. "Help! Somebody help my mama!" And that's when she saw them. Across the street, the Riders, a group of tough-looking men with leather jackets, their motorcycles glinting under the streetlights. They looked dangerous, but to Emily, they looked like hope. She ran towards them, tears streaking her cheeks. "Please, the man in that big building, he's hurting my mama!" The leader knelt in front of her. His name was Jake Ramirez, a man who had seen his share of violence, but never ignored a cry for help. His voice softened. "Where is she, sweetheart?" Emily pointed back at the tower. "Inside! Please hurry!" Jake's jaw tightened. "Bear, Falcon, with me," he ordered. Engines roared to life, growling like thunder. The riders shot across the street, the ground trembling under their tires. Inside, Richard was pacing, still fuming. "She embarrassed me in front of my guests," he muttered. "I'll have her fired by morning." But his rant was cut short by the echo of heavy boots. The glass doors flew open. Jake Ramirez stepped in first, broad, calm, dangerous. Behind him, 2 riders followed, their faces unreadable. Richard's jaw tightened. "Who the hell are you people?" Jake's gaze swept over the scene, the broken mop, the spilled bucket, the trembling woman pressed against the wall. His voice came out low. "You the one who's been hitting her?" Richard scoffed. "Get out of my building before I—" "Before what?" Jake interrupted, stepping closer. "Before you hit someone smaller than you?" The silence that followed was heavy. Even Richard's guests stopped breathing. Jake's eyes locked on his. "You think money gives you power. It doesn't. It just shows who you really are." Richard tried to push him, but Jake grabbed his wrist mid-swing, twisting it just enough to make him stop. "Don't," Jake said softly. For the first time that night, Richard looked afraid. Outside, sirens began to wail. Someone must have called the cops. Sarah fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. When Jake looked back at her, his tone changed completely. "You okay, ma'am?" Sarah nodded weakly. "Thank you. You saved my life." Jake took off his leather jacket and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. "Nobody lays a hand on a woman like you. Not while I'm breathing." Moments later, the doors opened again. Emily ran in, her tiny arms wrapping around her mother's neck. "Mama," she sobbed, "I was so scared." Sarah held her tight, whispering through tears, "It's okay, baby. It's over." As red and blue lights flickered across the marble floors, officers entered. Richard Hale's empire of arrogance finally crumbled, one act of kindness at a time. Jake and his crew stood quietly as police took statements. He looked down at Sarah and Emily, mother and daughter holding each other in the chaos, and smiled faintly. "You two are stronger than you know," he said. Sarah whispered, "How can I ever thank you?" Jake shook his head. "You don't have to. Just pay it forward someday. Help the next person who needs it." He turned, walked toward his bike, and the engines roared again, not as noise, but as victory. Under the night sky, as the riders disappeared down the empty street, Emily whispered, "Mama, were they angels?" Sarah smiled through her tears. "Maybe they were, baby. Maybe they were." And for the first time in a long time, she looked at the world and it didn't feel so cruel anymore. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather and ride under the moon.